Welcome back to Life in Cyber. Oh my God, shut up, Shannon. Let's take to it. Oh man. Welcome back to Life in Cyber. Today we're going to be talking about how to break into cybersecurity. We're going to go into what entry level is, what entry level isn't, how cybersecurity is not entry level, but we're going to cover the skills you need, the certs and education you need, and the typical route. So I'm going to go and start today, guys. I'm going to start off our conversation with what entry level is. And I'm going to say on a vague level, so not specifically cybersecurity, but just across the entire sphere of the planet. Entry level is basically what it takes to start any job without needing any skills, right? So if you can go into a job and they provide all of the training that you need to do the job, that is entry level. But if you have requirements on that job where there's a certain amount of education, a bachelor's degree, a certification, anything like that, any level of experience needed to start the job, that's not entry level, that's intermediate. And so that's one of the first things we want to kind of get across here. And if you're working in tech, those most of the time are not entry level jobs. There are some entry level jobs that could be, right? You know, like help desk could theoretically be entry level if it's structured correctly. Call centers could be, or general tech support in tech is a good way to get an entry level job, student employment, right? But there are a lot, like a majority of jobs in tech or in cybersecurity, not entry level at all.
So like sysadmin is an entry level?
No, sorry, Shannon.
Like database admin is an entry level?
No, that's not.
What about like an infrastructure admin? Is that entry level?
It could be, depending on who you're asking. No, it's not.
No. Okay. So what is entry level?
Anything that you're doing, Shannon.
Oh. That's a low bar.
It is.
Damn.
Man, we give you so much hell, Shannon, but no.
Just feed right into it.
I was like, governance?
No.
In my organization, yes. GRC is not entry level.
So how do you jumpstart your career? I mean, like, how do you get in at the very bottom? Typically, from what I've seen, is you get on an internship or you start somewhere that they're willing to take on like a Padawan, so to speak, like someone that they're willing to train up and then hand off the keys to, but those are hard to come by. So what would be the best ways or best places to look to get that type of opportunity?
Well, I think a lot of that is looking for, like I said, like help desk or student employment type of roles. But other than that, I think it's about like specifically breaking down like what are the skills that you need to develop on your own outside of work, right? So what skills do you need to develop, whether that be with an entry level job or something you do on your own through your own personal learning? What types of like certifications and education you need to pursue, and just kind of carving out that path into getting that first, intermediate style role. And you can typically do that by developing those skills outside of an entry level role as well, right? So through a portfolio of work or through projects that you do on the side. We've done an episode now on a home lab. Home labs can help you develop those skills, right? So there's a lot. Why don't we break into those skills that are needed? Yeah, home labs, YouTube videos are always really great. But cybersecurity is, man, there's so many different aspects to it, right? So there's risk management, asset management, the architectural side, the engineering side, the networking side, all that communication that goes with that. Identity and access management is huge. Security operations centers, threat hunting, incident response, incident management, disaster recovery, business continuity. It just kind of goes on and on. It's really just about how do we protect the assets that we have in this business so that the business can continue running if something went wrong.
And so there's a whole smorgasbord of potential skills that you could build and ways that you can direct your career into something that best fits you.
Yeah, I totally agree that there's a lot of these core skills that are needed for even in an entry level position that we're looking for. And so we were talking about those basic networking skills, everything like that. But as we move into it, we always forget about the other piece, right? Not only do we need the hard skills, we need to move into the soft skills themselves. Unfortunately, most of us who get into information technology, cybersecurity in particular, actually are very introverted. We've talked about this in previous casts, and that's a huge problem in our industry because the IT industry is a
job.
It's a user-facing industry, your customer-facing industry.
Oh.
So even if you move into IT and you're like, oh, I never have to deal with the quote-unquote customers for the business, all the users of your systems are your customers. So you have to learn these skills such as communication, problem solving, ingenuity sometimes, right? I mean, I remember a few stories of Shannon and I trying to figure out how the hell we're going to get this cable across the hallway when we can't get to it, right? So do we use a crossbow? Like, how do we get this cable over there? So there's all these different things that you have to worry about, and as well as trying to behave so you don't end up in HR.
I would add to that curiosity, right? Like one of the things we talked about a lot of times in this cast is if you're not interested in what you're doing, if you don't love technology, you're not going to keep up with it. You have to read about it. You have to like doing it in your free time. You have to be interested in it, and that interest needs to stay with you, right? Otherwise, because if
Passion.
you don't keep up with that, if you don't have, you're right, that's the perfect word. If you don't have that passion, you're not going to stay up to speed. You're not going to be constantly learning the new technologies, and you're going to become outpaced and you're going to become obsolete, right? So if you really like tech, and tech is good for people who don't get bored or who get bored very easily, so they have to kind of jump to new topics very often. But you have to have that curiosity and that love for learning. So to add to this, I want to kind of break down those core skills. So we talked about the soft skills just now: communication, problem solving, curiosity, ingenuity. I think from a core, like actual hard skills that are easy to study, you definitely need to have basic networking. You have to have an understanding of solid operating systems, and you have to have a solid understanding of like programming fundamentals. So any programming language, it doesn't matter which. If you know Python, great. If you know Java, great. If you learned COBOL 35 years ago, that's fine too, as long as you can translate that into a current programming language in some kind, right? We find that like having programming skills of any kind help overlap and translate well into scripting, into reading code that you need to break down. You don't have to know it or have it super memorized. You have to be able to work with it, right? So don't expect yourself to be an expert in programming. You don't. None of us have the syntax memorized. That's not the point. It's can you understand it when you're working with it. So I would say that's kind of the basic skills that are needed. So let's start looking at some of the certifications and education that can get you there.
Right. Those basic skills are very important. And I think one of that we always leave off and is troubleshooting. We have to know troubleshooting very well in our industry as well. Critical thinking is it's used every day. And if you don't know how to troubleshoot a problem from beginning to end without knowing anything but symptoms, it's a very hard industry for someone to get into. Not everyone's going to hold your hand, and not everything is going to be something that is very easy to Google. But if you know what you're looking for, you're like starting to suspect it. And I call it the smoking gun scenario with all the students. Is if you can find the smoking gun, then you can maybe follow the breadcrumbs back to the scenario to what's going on and actually fix it. But as you were talking about, like a lot of this learning doesn't need education per se, right? We use certifications, and so using that certification, I think, is a great way for us to push on this continuous learning and figure out how do we prove that we have that base knowledge.
So where do we want to start, right? So I think from the basic standpoint, I think we've all looked at CompTIA. They have a great set of basic certifications that people can have, Net Plus, A Plus, and then we kind of move into more intermediate stuff. That's where we start getting a little bit more vendor specific, where you might go CCNA, you might get like a checkpoint certification for like firewalls or what it might be, and then you got to get more into cybersecurity, where they kind of have its own levels. Security Plus, CISSP and the OSCP, where they get a little bit more specific into what skills you want to actually utilize, and learn within the industry itself.
So you mentioned A plus and Net plus, Josh. Like, what are those, and why should I start there versus just going straight to a Security Plus certification?
Yeah, so A plus is really that initial troubleshooting certification, kind of like you mentioned earlier. So A plus is very much about troubleshooting user issues on a hardware level, kind of on the end user machines. So you got to know how some basic operating systems work, how some hardware works, what connectors go where, so they can help even start even just helping your grandma or helping your parents. I think we've all been there. That's kind of that A plus and a more advanced skill set than just helping mom and pop. But that's kind of where you start. And Network Plus is kind of that next step where it's like, all right, let me learn a little bit about networking. Let me learn how to put a router together, how to connect a switch,
Right.
where each layer goes. Like, where does a firewall go when you finally get into that stage? Where does the IPS or these other things go? Because there is a specific order to put some of those things. And if you get that wrong, you might cause some problems that,
Mm-hmm.
an amateur may not know how to fix.
Yeah, I would say like Net Plus is like, okay, you now know what a keyboard and a mouse is. Now let's go further, right? We need to go
Yeah.
deeper.
I think
But
Network Plus really kind of highlights how much of an ecosystem systems can be, right? Because you get into subnetting, you get into actual like structure and virtual design, you get into protocols, the OSI model. You start to really understand the concepts that help you design systems and how to interconnect them, right? And that's the more important thing. It's
mm-hmm.
the physical aspect is there, but I think the conceptual aspect of how do all of these interconnect and work together is what's really important. And I think that builds into the Security Plus, right? So you start straight at the Security Plus? Yes. Should you? It depends. I don't typically recommend it. I really think you should start with the Net Plus and go to the Security Plus. The Security Plus is going to have a lot of the same content anyway from the Network Plus, and then build on that. The A Plus is one of those where I think if you have no experience and you haven't started yet, it's a great starting point. But if you have about a year under your belt of doing some troubleshooting work, it's really not that useful. You can skip that one if you've got a little experience already. But the Net Plus and Security Plus really go hand in hand. I don't
You
think
could
you can skip
also
them.
sleep through the course if you want to, as an alternative.
Yeah, Shannon slept through the course, which is awesome. But the Security Plus itself, CompTIA actually recommends you have the A plus, the Net plus, and 4 years experience. That is what they recommend before you take the Security Plus. Now, can you do it with less? Yes. It's just this is what they're thinking that you should have for experience before you take it, because it does go a lot deeper than some of the other things. And they're not going to teach you about A plus. They're not going to teach you about networking. They expect that you already have that knowledge and move to the next level.
So here's a pointed question. Do you need a degree?
I hate that
No,
question.
but it makes it a lot easier. That's my answer to that.
I think that's actually a really good answer is no, it's not for everybody, but does having that piece of paper open doors? Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
It's much easier to get a job or a better career when you have that piece of paper. Now, is it a one for one replacement for experience? Some people say it is. You know, have a 4 year degree, it's a 4 years of experience. Some people call it that. Um, but I definitely say, like, if I had somebody with no degree and maybe only a couple certs and someone with a degree who's also worked maybe a couple years as a student networking technician or something of that nature, I might pick the one with the degree. The degree is definitely easier. But I'm talking from the private sector. We can talk about public sector as well.
I always say it depends, right? And it depends on a couple of things. It's what you want, and it's what you want your skill set to be. It's what type of place you want to work at, right? So, and I may have gone on this tangent before, so stop me if I'm repeating myself. But I think, like, for example, can you easily go out and like get a cloud degree or get a security degree and get a job in that? The answer is typically yes, and you could get a decent paying job for that. The downside is you're not very versatile if the market shifts, right? So if you get that specific certification in that specific technology, you need a job in that technology, but then the technology changes or it doesn't sell as much, and so they're starting to do layoffs. Do you have the skills to be versatile enough to go somewhere else? Or if that company goes under, do you have the skills to be versatile enough to go to another company and still translate well, right? So that's where I think degrees shine in that regard. They give you a foundation that protects you from those shifts. The other thing that I think it really provides, and this is really undervalued, it's not necessarily about the hard skills, it's about the networking. Especially if you're at an in-person university, you get so much opportunity to connect with people. In fact, that's how all four of us are here right now, right? That's how most of us have jobs, right? It's one of those where, like, once you get to know folks, and this is the same thing, the same reason why we talk about going to conferences is a good thing. It helps you help each other grow, and you all do that throughout your entire careers and lives, right? But beyond that, you're going to get to know professors. You're going to get to know other folks that come in. You might get an internship that's a part of that pipeline. Those are more valuable than the piece of paper. The piece of paper itself is less valuable than the experience that you get by getting that degree.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that point of view. The reason why I brought up private versus public, though, is if you do want to get a public job or a government job, sometimes it is a requirement for employment.
That's true.
So degrees, while not required for all jobs, may be required for certain jobs. So if you want to get into military contractor, if you want to get into other jobs that may require it, it opens more doors. Not only are you more rounded, like you say, Kenny, more rounded, more versatile, you can move places. It is definitely, I think it makes the job easier. Now, I always have to be careful by saying this. It's like, so everyone's like, yeah, let's just go to school. It's not easy. There's a lot of jobs that make you a well-rounded person. There's a lot of soft skills and hard skills that they teach you, but also be very careful how you get into it. If I had one regret in my life, it's I have too many student loans. I'll
Hmm.
just put that out there. And
Yeah.
so be very smart in how you do it. Don't just go.
So I've seen this on the government side anyway, working in healthcare. And my piece of original advice, and I want to bounce it off of you guys, see if you see the same way, is I used to advocate for them, students getting a 2 year degree and then piling up on certs. But I kind of feel like the trend now is they're trying to phase out the associate's degree and then just replace it completely with a bachelor's. It's almost as if the associate's is good as a high school degree or diploma at this point. Do
What
you
I've seen
feel
is the
like that's accurate?
associates. I've seen the associate's degree as more a platform to help people transfer into a 4U university. So from a job perspective, I think you're right. I haven't seen associate degrees on job descriptions for a long time. But what I do see is that a lot of people will get their associates at like a community college or somewhere else a little bit cheaper, and then go to a 4 year degree and only have to pay full price essentially for 2 years instead of for four. I see it sometimes with non-traditional students who take a break, or they get an associates and then they go to work or they have a kid or whatever it is, and then they come back, and then that kind of helps them preserve that progress. But you're right, I haven't seen it much in the job field much.
Yeah, and
So,
that's one of the things I do is I teach at a community college, and that's one of the things we always tell to the students is the community college. It depends on your career aspirations. It really does. So, what kind of job do you see yourself in 5 years? And we ask the students this all the time. Some students just want to get a data center technician job, and they'll be perfectly happy working 30 years of that. But there's other people that I'm like, well, what do you want to do next? So they might come into the community college, get a certificate. And when I say certificate, it doesn't have to be a full associate. Sometimes they just get a certificate, go into the job market, start to see that, hey, I like technology. This is the field for me. And then they continue on. Like Kenny said, the associates I view as just a stepping stone. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to go get the bachelor's or the master's, but it's definitely part of the career path that we'd highly recommend. And Kenny brought up a really good point. It's normally a lot cheaper to start there instead of wasting all your time and effort to say, is IT right for me? It's a good place to start. And you may be like, this is not for me. You go sit for the A+ and you flunk it so badly. You're like, you know what? I'm done. I don't like IT. I'm out of here. And it's a lot cheaper of a pivot or a swivel if you want to go to something else.
so it's fair to say that if you are going in and you know this career is going to be what you want it to be, and you are going to spend your entire career path in IT or IT sec or governance or data analytics to just go for the bachelor's straight out of the gate. Because what I'm starting to see now is they're requesting bachelor's, and then if you get into more leadership type roles, governance, things of that nature, they're starting to require masters.
I would say it again, depending on the industry. So to John's point earlier, a lot of private industry doesn't care as much. But yeah, I would say if you're comparing an associate's to a 4 year bachelor's degree, yeah, if you know that that's what you want to do, definitely just jump straight into the bachelor's, right? But what I find working in education is a lot of people aren't sure. They don't know, right? And if you think about traditional students, they're fresh out of high school. They don't know what the world is, man. Like they don't even know what it's like to pay rent. This is their first time having to make decisions. This is their first time
Mhm.
having to feed themselves most of the time, right? Why are we asking them to suddenly make this decision about their entire life? And that's where like John's point is if you aren't sure and you want to give it a try in a way that's not going to set you back with student loans that are going to be crippling for a while, definitely try a community college and get your feet wet a little bit and see if this is for you before you really jump in. But if you're committed, like you've already done some of that experimentation, say in high school or whatever it may be, and you're like, nope, this is the path for me, by all means jump on in.
And sometimes
Yeah.
it's just also about affordability. Sometimes it just makes more financial sense to do that community college first. I know plenty of people have not gone that route.
Yeah, it is actually cheaper to get your associates at a community college and then move on to a university. There's no shame in that. Honestly, I wish I did it myself just because it would have saved a lot more money in the long run. But at the same time, if you think about earnability, let's talk about somebody who's just coming out of high school or they're a non-traditional student who are they've been they've been graduated from high school for 10 years. I don't know. What if they're working McDonald's or Taco Bell or Walmart? They want to better themselves or they want to go into a different career that's maybe less labor intensive. IT definitely is a great career for that. And so I always tell them, hey, come get that technician certificate. Go get that data center technician, go get that help desk job, that call center job that Kenny was talking about for entry level. And then you can then work your way up through the path because like when a manager job does come around, you're right, Shannon, they're looking for people that have bachelor's and master's degrees most of the time. I remember even working at Dish, we had a requirement and to be a supervisor, you had to have a bachelor's at the very minimum. If you didn't have it, HR didn't even look at your transfer or even your resume because it was a requirement to have the job.
So you touched on something there where you said you encourage people to come in if they're looking to better themselves because IT can be an easy career, but that isn't necessarily always the case. A lot of people perceive IT as an easy career because it's a desk job. You get to go into work, you get to sit down depending on your path. If you're a network person, telecom, sorry, you're going to have to get up and hop around. Same with sysadmin. But, what
Right.
are some of the hard truths?
The job is definitely very competitive at times. That's one of the big ones. I'm going to hit more on the labor side that you were mentioning. At the beginning, you may find a job pulling cable. And is that
Hmm.
a very not labor intensive job? No, that's very labor intensive. You're going to come home aching every night. Your fingers are going to look mangled. No, it's definitely kind of a rite of passage. Is the way I like to look at it. Is can you lift 50 pounds over your head? You see that on the job posting. There's a reason for it because you're going to be lifting servers, switches, moving
Yeah.
racks, gear, computers. At the very beginning, I do have to say it can be a laborious job, but if you continue at it, it gets better.
Yeah. One of my core memories of getting into the field is working with you at our first meaningful job, pushing up the ceiling tiles and having to run cable with the 12 inches of that loose frickin' insulation falling down on us in our polos, and itching like hell for the rest of the day because we have frickin' insulation down our shirts, finding it in seams of our pants and cracks that we thought we had long gotten rid of throughout the day.
When you don't have
Sometimes,
when you don't have the experience, what else are you going to do?
yeah,
I still jump on ladders from time to time. It's a part of the job, right? And if you've got to fill in for someone or you've got to jump in and help because you've done it before, that's just part of it, right? There is definitely some labor involved, but it's not a lot, right? It can be a lot if that's your dedicated job, especially if you're dedicated,
yeah.
in telecom or whatever it may be. But I think even outside of that, there's still some of I would say too, the one of the hard truths, and we talked about this earlier already, is that requirement of ongoing learning, right? You have to constantly be learning and reading, and that can get exhausting, right?
You're
And
telling me that programming language I learned like 3 years ago is obsolete
yeah,
already?
yeah, it's gone. Except unless it was Python, that one's still good. But if you learned like Ruby, but let's talk about that what that creates, right? If you're constantly doing ongoing learning, burnout is what comes of that, right? And so what we talk about when it comes to technology, it is a burnout field. So what we say is you have to have strategies to combat burnout, right? And a lot of the time that just means like using your time off, use your PTO, take vacations, disconnect, find hobbies that are not as close to your job as what you do, right? Find a way to stay on top of things, continue reading, continue learning, but you need to find that other thing too to keep you away from this. And that's one of the hard truths about this is you can't just envelop yourself in it and stay healthy. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. If you're really lucky, you'll end up finding a career path and an organization that's willing to work with you and embrace with you on your growth. If you want to try out cybersecurity for a while, they'll let you work in that sector for a little bit. And then if you want to hop over to a different team and do networking, they'll embrace that and allow you to do it. There's not as many of those around anymore. So if you're lucky enough to get into one, I would say latch onto it and stay there. And there are some desk hazards, as you saw. A 50-pound cat can jump up on you and smother your face.
She's 18 pounds. Thank you.
Mm.
What is that in cat
So-
years?
And I think the other part is we always have to worry about those hours, man. So when you're first starting out in particular, you're probably going to be on an on-call schedule. Hopefully it's a rotation and you're not always on call, but there will be some times where you're going to be on call and your significant other may kick you in the middle of the night when your phone's ringing at 2:30 and telling you to get the heck out of the room. That's the nice way of putting it. It comes with more colorful language.
And then
But
there's plant
it happens.
maintenance windows, right?
Mm-hmm. And if you're really unlucky, you're going to get an oh shit call of either we got ransomware or the main core at the facility just went down, and you're going to
Right.
spend the next 36 hours up trying to get things up and running again.
I think
But
we
it's
have different
Christmas.
definitions of lucky. But no, yeah, hopefully you have also a boss that makes maintenance windows fun. Like sometimes you can get some fun things out of maintenance windows. Like one of the things that I tried to do with my team was like we didn't really do much fun type activities, but I always got them something really great to eat. So we'd get like sushi at 11 o'clock at night and we'll just pig out. And I'm like, all right, let's go wrap up. You know what I mean? There's ways to just to try to make that enjoyable. Because yeah, it can be stressful. It can be burnout. My kids are really my separation from it. All the activities I have my kids in, as much as it drives me crazy and destroys my calendar and my life, and why I was 15 minutes late tonight. It's it's my separation. It helps keep me sane.
Yeah, I think that's something we always like to talk about. We talked a lot about IT in here, and the big thing is I go all the way back to the beginning. Kenny said, cybersecurity is not an entry-level job. So you may have to start as that password reset person, and work your way through it.
I think there are some, we call it low-hanging fruit, but some obvious ones that are easy to pick up on, right? So like internships, volunteering, and actually volunteering is how I got started, right? I just called random computer shops when I was a teenager and said, hey, would you be willing to take on a volunteer? I'd love to learn what you guys do. Right. So there's plenty of different ways to do that. Joining cybersecurity communities, there's a lot of communities on Discord. And that goes back into that networking conversation. So if you can get in there and start posting and communicating, you may meet some people and find some opportunities you don't expect.
Yeah. We were all members of ACM, which I think is also a good avenue to pursue, is different types of associations and groups.
Work studies as well. That's how I got my start.
Networking, soft skills.
I think that's always some really good advice. So for anyone who wants to get into cybersecurity, listen to everything we said. Watch it again. Make a plan. Go for it. Continue learning.
Ask questions down below. Shannon will definitely be there.
Stay curious.
I will talk to you. Ask me questions. I love to respond to them sometimes.
Give him
Hope to
some
define
smart
it.
ass questions, please, because he loves those.
I do.
I especially like it when people tell Shannon how great he is.
I do too.
Yeah, Tom Hardy, how you doing, man?
So if you like things like this, our next episode is going to be about the truth of cybersecurity salaries, the truth and the not so truth that people like to advertise about our monies. So subscribe, leave a comment.
Thank you for watching.
Love you guys.
Bye.